Hello and welcome to the Infinite Ammo Podcast, Episode 2. I'm Alec Haloka, and today we'll be talking to Edmund McMillen.
Okay, so here's Edmund. Hi, Edmund.
Hello.
Hi,
Alec.
how are you doing?
I've been better.
Yeah, I hear it's hot out where you are.
It's hot.
It sounds annoying, but also kind of nice because it's cold where I am. But
I'd much rather it be cold. But yeah, again, I'm in a situation where whenever I complain to anybody about weather, they scoff at my comments because they're cold or too hot or whatever else. But still, like this town is amazingly mild, and it's not so mild today. So I'm gonna complain.
So you're like in the middle of like the weird sort of after death throes of Meat Boy, right? Like Meat Boy's sort of mostly done, but it's not released yet.
Yeah, it is beyond bizarre. It's a real fucking emotional roller coaster, I guess you could say, because like it's done but it's not done. Like
Right.
the book, I want the book to kind of be closed, and I kind of don't want it to be closed. So like it's half open for the most part.
Right.
I know a lot of work still needs to go into the WiiWare version and the PC version, and we're trying to take a break. But like, I don't know, it still feels so funky because it feels like the game is finished. Because I mean, the Xbox version is finished. You know, we can't work on it anymore. And going from like the craziest work schedule I've ever been on in my entire life, which was like not an over-exaggeration of 12 to 14-hour days for 2 months straight with no weekend breaks, no breaks, period. It was just constant crunch. It was overwhelming. And it was very stressful but very hellish while doing it. But now at this point, it's like there's a part of me that was so immersed in that horrible, horrible schedule where like I kind of want it because it was so familiar. I guess it's like being in like some sort of concentration camp or being a POW, and then like you hear those guys that when they get out of the camps, they'll go back and like want to kind of visit that torture, I guess in a way. But yeah, there's something very familiar that I guess
Stockholm syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah, I got used to the lack of sleep. I got used to the pressure and the discomfort and the stress and I don't know. I guess I felt like I was really pushing it and I was living pretty hard, and yeah, I could feel it. You know, I could feel the amount of life I was
felt alive.
Yeah, that I was, because I could feel like my blood pressure raising. I could feel all this stuff, and now that it's not like that, I feel empty in a lot of ways, and it's a really hard thing to explain to anybody who I don't think who hasn't developed and finished a game, especially one that is put out to the public and judged and everything else.
Well, also I think like developing for a major console must be really different because I've never done that. But I can imagine that there's extra pressure because you can't really be like, oh, we're just going to take another couple months to polish this up more. It's like, well, but Microsoft wants it now or whatever. Like I'm sure there's some leeway on some milestones, but it seems like there's a lot more scary corporate kind of pressure.
Yeah, I didn't. I've said this before, but yeah, I went into this knowing that it was going to be really stressful, and it wasn't going to be what I expected it to be, and I was told that by everybody else and warned, and I had no idea. Like I had no idea the amount of pressure, the amount of stress that would. You know, and it's the thing that sucks about it now is I have nothing to show for at this point.
Right.
Like I went through all this, you know, I put Danielle through all this. Like our whole lives changed for almost 2 years because of this, and I have at this point absolutely nothing to show for. I have no money. The game's not out. Like,
right.
But it's done. Like I've finished working on it, and it's just kind of like it's a fucking mindfuck. It's
well, the thing is, you do have the game. Like I've been working on a project where partway through I decided to like redo a whole bunch of it, And that really feels like you've got nothing because you're actually throwing out a whole bunch of stuff, and then you're going back to the beginning, and you're like, okay, well, I have the experience of making this once, but you don't have anything you could show to anyone and be like, oh, here's the game, And then that's really frustrating. But yeah, I understand that. Like, it's just you have the game, it's all done, but nobody's actually going to see it.
Yeah.
You've got tons of press and stuff, so I guess that's not too bad. But
it's a weird headspace. It's hard when you're in it. Like
right.
It's so what's the word? It's so relative. Like just like the weather thing I was talking about before. Like, there's no way for me to complain about the situation that I'm in and have anybody have any empathy for me whatsoever. Everybody thinks that we have a console deal, and that
yeah,
we should,
that means it's like the golden ticket to happiness. And
yeah, it's and I can tell you right now that, like, and this is something that I stand by very firmly. If you're not happy at your poorest, if you're not happy where you started, like the bottom of the
right.
The bottom of the totem pole situation, if you don't enjoy that and didn't enjoy that, you're not going to enjoy the rise to the top of the totem pole.
Yeah,
because you don't get any fuller. Like,
no.
I'm very proud. I'm very, very proud of Super Meat Boy. I believe it is the best game I've ever worked on. I believe it's really great. I think that me and Tommy did an amazing job, and I'm very proud of it. But the amount of positive energy, or whatever you want to call it, that I get from the press, from all the positive whatevers, it's no different from the ether, the ether feeling, the ether press, or Time Fuck, or any of my previous works. It doesn't fill me up anymore. It's not like I just keep getting fuller and I feel
right.
better and better and I feel great. My capacity is limited.
Yeah, I had a sort of similar experience. I know, like, we're both IGF Seamus McNally winners or whatever, right? And
yeah,
a lot of people think that that's another sort of like golden ticket to success or happiness or something thing. Like, once you win that, then everything else is just going to be, a walk in the park. Of course, it's not true. Like, for Aquaria, we won it and we hadn't finished the game completely yet, and then it was like, oh, now people are actually going to want to play it, so now the game actually has to be really good, and we have to make sure we finish it properly and all that, and there's all these extra pressures, and it was a great moment to win that thing, and it felt good for like a day. It felt like a golden ticket for a day, and after that it was like still nice to know that happened, but it was still reality after that. It wasn't any kind of glorious fantasy Adventureland or anything. So
yeah, that's the I mean, that's exactly what I've been struggling with at this point. It's the illusion, and I think it's something that we've been told, by everybody around us in television and everything else, that once you hit that payoff, that you'll be happy. Once you hit that payoff, everything will be great. And there's all these different tiers, I guess you could say, of success. And if winning the IGF was a big one too, but it's just like that stuff does only last for a limited amount of time, and then it's gone. It's just like anybody who hasn't won. I remember when we got into the finals again, we had a lot of people saying, "Well, why'd you even enter it again?
Right.
You won it." And I'm like, wait, this is a completely different thing. This is completely different. I'm a different person than I was then. I'm a different fucking designer. I'm working with a different person. This is a completely different game, and I don't have that feeling anymore. That feeling left shortly after we won, and it would be nice to have that feeling again. But yeah, it's such a fleeting thing, and I think it all comes down to, and this is what I've been thinking about, is realizing that the joy that I get from game design and from making games doesn't come whatsoever in the outcome. It doesn't come in the awards. It doesn't come in the press. It doesn't come in any kind of positive feedback. It comes in enjoying the creative process, and that's what I'm in love with, and that's what makes me happy, and that's why right now I don't feel so great, because I'm not creating something anymore.
Right.
And that's what I want. Like,
well, it's a pretty easy problem to solve. You just need to work on something else.
Yeah, but the loophole there is that I admittedly am working I'm not in a healthy situation, and Meat Boy development for the past 2 months wasn't healthy. It was very unhealthy and not really good for me or Tommy when it came to the amount of stress that we had to put ourselves through
Right.
and all that sort of stuff. And it's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for my marriage to obsessively work my life away. Uh, I want to be creative and I want to be driven and I want to be. I can't kill myself and be some martyr for just because. I need some balance here.
Yeah.
And
Well, I guess
I actually got outside for the first time in like almost 2 months. Actually, did turn on my computer. It was fucking surreal. Like, I went outside, I saw people living. It was an inspiring thing, and I started drawing again, and that's something that I hadn't done in like a year or two. It was pretty crazy, but yeah, no, it's so hard to get lost in these little pockets of I guess existence of like who you are. I'm a game designer and I'm in this independent community and blah 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 blah. You get lost in it, and you start thinking about your status and where you are and what you want.
right,
And
right.
that stuff doesn't really matter in the big scheme of
Well,
things.
the thing is, I have a hard time now getting back into the pocket. So I'm almost having the opposite problem, where to me it's like, oh, everyone else just goes around and they hang around outside and they see their friends. I see my friends a lot and we hang out and just do regular stuff and it's great. But on the other hand, I'm not working as much as I used to when I was like, I got to prove myself, I got to make something that people care about. Now I'm sort of like, oh, I already did. So, I want to do it again, and I'm motivated to do that. But it's like hard to go back into the tiny indie games pocket and be like, this is all that matters now. It's like, well, maybe I'll just go, for a drive with my girlfriend tonight and not think about games at all. It's like, I'm almost wondering if I need to force myself to go more into the man cave kind of mentality or whatever.
Yeah, it's a weird. I think I'd like to believe that this is a common thing in any creative field. I know it's more prominent in game developers because game developers, I think, tend to be antisocial kind of people. I mean, when you get a bunch of antisocial people together, then they can glom together and they'll be fine. But I think overall, like, it's a, I guess, a nerd mentality to kind of isolate. And I think it's also a creative mentality to isolate. You withdraw into your mind in order to dig these things out. So
Right.
it's a comfortable place.
Well,
But it's a dangerous thing too. And
Yeah.
without actually going out and living, I think there's a lot. It's very hard to pull from anything creatively. I think
Yeah.
the most inspirational things are things that come out of living life and not just.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, like, I agree with you. Like, I think when I do the most interesting stuff that I do is based on life experiences. But if most of my life is spent making games, then I won't have
Yes.
life experiences to draw from other than game making life experiences. So I kind of wonder if there's a weird, infinite loop of shit that culminates by living it that way. I don't know. Like, I don't think I've really been overdoing that lately, but when I was younger, I was definitely just trying to make games all the time.
Well, that's the sad. I think the sad fact here is I think realistically, it is impossible to make it as an independent designer unless you throw your whole life into your project. I do think that it is impossible. I think sometimes. I don't even know if it's something that most creative people can stop themselves from doing. You get obsessed about something, you get inspired by it, you fall in love with it, and you go until it's done. And I think it's a common thing in most creative people. But yeah, it's dangerous. It's of course dangerous. Doing anything obsessively is a dangerous thing, and balancing things is so hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it just takes time, and it's just sad. It's just that I've been through this. Like, I've been doing this for almost 7 years, and I've released quite a few games, and I still can't shake that. I still can't seem to completely balance myself to the point of not having to feel shitty
Right.
finish something.
Well, I think like for us, we might share a thing where the shitty feelings are actually kind of valuable in a way. Like they suck when you're in them, but having that experience kind of informs a lot of stuff that we do, I think. So I'm not sure, like personally, I'm not sure if I would be, if I didn't feel shitty, I think I'd feel even more shitty because I'd be like, where's the shitty feeling? Where did that go?
Well, yeah, it's a perspective building thing. Like you can't expect to talk about things that are relevant or learn from your mistakes or anything like that without actually making mistakes, and going through tough shit and, doing the usual. It's the process, like I've learned and grown from the worst possible things that have happened to me in my life. So, those in the end become the most valuable, but it still just sucks.
Yeah. It's not pleasant.
It still sucks to, not feel super great after you've done something so important.
You were talking before about how you had this development cycle. It was like 12 to 14 hours a day of stuff, and you were feeling like it wasn't healthy for you at all, or you and Tommy combined, just the amount of work that you had to do. And I guess there's sort of two questions stemming off of that idea. Because I went through sort of similar things, which is I want to work and get the game done, just work till I pass out kind of thing. One question I have is it worth it? And the other question I have is, how will that work in 10 years when we're all old?
When we're old?
Yeah.
Fuck. I can tell you if it's worth it yet. I'd like to say right now that the work that me and Tommy did on Meat Boy, of course, was worth it. The last 2 months of development and the crunch involved in that, I can't tell you if it's worth it yet because I don't know how well accepted the game will be on the Xbox community or how well it'll do. I'd like to think that it'll do fine and we'll be fine and everything else like that. And I'm sure with some hindsight, once I gain some perspective and time passes, I'm sure I'll feel a lot better about the whole situation. The only positives I can get from it is, like, I feel like it was one of those endurance. I really pushed myself, and I know Tommy pushed himself even further. And it always feels good to kind of push your limits and see how far you can really take it. That was a big thing for me, especially a few years ago. Like in 2008 was like my most productive year, and it was a year where I was like, I'm just going to push myself and see my limits. And I thought I had, and obviously I hadn't because this was much, 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 much harder. And so in that sense, yeah, that's really cool. Now, in the future, I'd like to think in 10 years from now, I'll learn a lot from my experiences, and hopefully things will be easier. I can tell you right now that me and Tommy have learned so much of what not to do to make things easier on us for the next game. And I'd like to think that we'll have at least a lot of experience in console development.
So what are some of those things that you wouldn't do again?
Number one, I wouldn't start talking about my game until like 8 months before it was ready to be released.
Right.
That's a big one, because then you get a lot of people expecting things and people wanting things, and you can't help but let that affect you.
Right. Yeah, it's hard.
Even though I'm not making games for other people, I'm mostly making games, for myself. But there's still that bit of, like, if I see that people want things and they start complaining and they start saying, I wish it was out, blah, 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 you can't help but have something inside you that wants to push it, make it sure it gets out, sooner.
Yeah. And
that was one. And that also put the pressure on us as far as releasing maybe a few months earlier than we were ready to. I mean, a lot of it just came with since our press and word of mouth and everything else built so high. Basically, we had the opportunity to be in the Game Feast thing with Microsoft, but in order to do that, we needed to get the game done in 2 months, and we were about 4 months from being finished.
Right.
So we had to cram it all into those 2 months. Before that, it's hard to see, like, it's hard to really see how everything went, but before those 2 months, it was incredibly enjoyable. It was not that hard. Like, it was pretty relaxing. Me and Tommy were just blazing through it. It was a really joyous experience. and then these months of just hellish stressful crunch just kind of like blew our minds apart, I guess. And it was pretty crazy. And it'll be nice to hopefully next game me and Tommy work on will be, much more relaxing. We can get back in that mind frame. Of,
right. Because I have this weird theory that that, and I hope it's not true, but that the harder a project is to work on, sometimes the more rewarding or it'll turn out better in the end. And I'm kind of afraid of becoming too relaxed about stuff, and I feel like lately I've been tense, but not as tense as working on Aquaria ever was. And I'll give myself breaks if I'm like, well, I just can't figure this out. Well, I'll just work on something else, or I'll take a break or something. And I realize it's healthier, but at the same time, I'm wondering, is it detracting from it? Should I be going back to Crazy Town and just flipping out and working insanely? And like maybe some of that is necessary towards making something that really feels like unique or exciting or something in the end.
No, I totally understand. Like that's something that I thought a lot about too, especially when the Indie Fund came around, and I was thinking to myself, like all of the most important things, like the projects that I feel have the most worth that I've done, all come from extreme limitation, obsessive working,
right,
all that sort of stuff. And like, I don't believe they would have been possible if I had any kind of relaxed view or anything like that. It was all pressure, built from somewhere, and a lot of it came financially. Like realistically, the past, 15 Flash games that I've done, I needed to also get finished quickly so I could pay rent because I had no other means of income, and I'm quite poor. So that's a factor on this, and that was a big motivator for me, and that kind of pressure, helped get shit done. And if you really look back and like the past X amount of really successful games out there, all came from people that were basically going bankrupt for their games and really like giving it their all. And I think with Meat Boy, like me and Tommy threw everything into this. Like this was an, cards on the table. Like this is everything. Yeah. This is the culmination. It's our whole life experience in a game, and it's as good as we could possibly make it.
And I guess the thing is, like, that's pretty awesome. And then the question is, what the hell would you do next? Like once you've thrown everything into something and you've done it in this way that's like, okay, either this works or we're just totally fucked. Like we just have to, it has to succeed, otherwise we're really screwed. For a while at least. Like
luckily, while like the development process with Tommy and a lot of the other games I've done this way as well, I'm also a firm believer in making sure, trying your best to make the game's development be dynamic and be improvised. You want to be really, really open to everything around you and let things, seep in and let the game kind of design it itself. Because if you go in really rigid, you're going to be making mistakes and things are just going to feel soulless and formulaic, and it's just going to end in a bad. It's going to be like a company, That's how they have to do things.
Well, that's sort of why the indie fund model is a weird fit for indies, because I think they're looking at things in a business way. They're trying to see what's going to succeed and what sounds most likely to succeed. And the kind of stuff that we do, where it's like, well, we're going to like go in with very little money, and we're going to try and make something really personal. We don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. We have these ideas at the beginning. It's probably going to change as we go through and we have experiences working on it. And we want it to be open in that way. We want it to be like a journey that changes how we see it and changes the game and stuff. That's not like a great business proposition. It's like a really risky business proposition. So,
well, it was like, I ran into, originally when I got in touch with Microsoft, it was for Gish 2. Me and Alex were working on Gish 2 for it, and they had us go through the basic forms and everything else, and you kind of got to submit your design doc, and I I've never made a design doc, and I wasn't even sure how to go about it. I'm kind of sitting down here going like, I don't even know, like I'm lying, like I'm making stuff up. And I even put that in the form. Like I write like 2 paragraphs and I'm like, okay, and I just spiral off onto this thing where it's like, I want you guys to understand that I don't know what's to come. We're going to design around things as they go because that's going to be the best situation. If I tell you that this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, then your expectations are high in your mind of these specific things that might or might not work, or might not be fun. And like when we started Meat Boy, we wanted to do a lot of different things. We wanted to try out multiplayer, we wanted to try out co-op, and we found really quickly early on that those things were really not fun in this situation, right. And they weren't at all worth the effort involved in actually implementing them. And we of course made the mistake early on of saying that there was going to be multiplayer, right. And another lesson learned. But that's the thing, is like I think with game design, the more open you are and the more you let the game just kind of fall into place and just trust yourself, the more honest the game will come out. And I mean, we had a rough idea of what we wanted because we had a Flash game that we're kind of basing things off of. So we knew the boy was going to be made of meat. We knew the characters involved. We knew there was going to be platforming and wall jumping. That was basically it. Then it got crazy ambitious. I remember early on us saying like, Tommy talking about the replay feature, and that was just a totally improvised thing as well, where he's like, I think I can do this. Let's just throw it in and see what happens. And then of course that was in. We talked about the game control-wise. We wanted to have it control like Mario 3, but possibly better. Tighter controls, and faster. And I believe that we were able to achieve that as well. And there were just all these really ambitious ideas that we had that were like, how the hell can we make a game that compares to a classic platformer?
Right.
Like, is there any way to go about this, and how can we approach this in a way that's actually possible? And I think we just kind of went from the standpoint of, you remember when you were like 13 years old and you went to school and you were like sketching down ideas for the ultimate game on paper, where it would have all the things that you thought were
right.
so cool. Like, and I remember thinking to myself, I remember doing that a lot when I was young and thinking like, why doesn't a game, why aren't there any really weird games out there that I, yeah. Earthworm Jim was a game that I really liked a lot when I was younger, and I thought that game was really cool because it had a lot of weird elements to it. Mm-hmm. It just seemed so creative, and there's just so many games that it's just like, wouldn't it be awesome to have this game that has this, and this? It's, and of course a really, I guess, immature thing to think, because you're young and you're inexperienced and you don't understand the holes involved in the design process and why things wouldn't work. But
right.
Now me and Tommy are older and understand how to design games, and we're kind of looking at it again from that perspective. Like, how can we make the coolest shit, that our 13-year-old selves would just go nuts over, and the school become huge fanboys over.
Yeah.
And that was essentially it. That was our design document. Like, we wanted to feel like our childhoods, I guess, like our childhood experience with video games. And that's exactly what Meat Boy is like. I mean, it's a satire of me and Tommy's experience with games from the early 90s, all the video game cliches involved.
Do you think that, like, now that you've done that, and it's done in such a giant way, do you think you've purged some of that? Like, you've gotten past some of it? Like, you're like, okay, we went there and we explored that, like, for whatever you're going to do next, are you thinking, like, it's going to be completely different? It's going to be, or is it going to be more of the same kind of concept of, here's what we would have liked as 13-year-old kids? I'm just curious, like, how much you can, like, mine out of that.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I know whenever I work with somebody new, it's always a new, there's always a new feel, there's always a new vibe or whatever. And with Tommy, right when I met him, I instantly felt like, he reminded me of a high school friend.
Yeah.
We got along really well. We really like the same stuff. We have the same sense of humor. We have a surprisingly amount in common, even though like our mindsets creatively are usually on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Yet we get along so well, and we like the same things and think the same way. So right off the bat, I just was reminded of high school, freshman year in high school, and or even middle school, and that kind of best friends feel. Having sleepovers and staying up and watching Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy, watching MTV, watching Liquid Television, and bullshitting on the playground about Mortal Kombat and which version was better, and playing Street Fighter, and all that stuff just kind of just started just flowing through, and it just seemed like, I don't know, it's just a reminder, like all these bells went off, and I was like, okay, there was just something magical about that time, and it would be awesome to kind of recreate that in a game, and
Mm-hmm.
and Tommy had the exact same feel and idea. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the next game will probably feel similar. I don't think it'll play anyway like Meat Boy, but I have a feeling that it'll probably be funny. It'll probably be violent. It'll probably be over the top.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to do something. It sounds horrible at this point, but I'd like to do something even more ambitious. I know Tommy would too. I think we both want to push ourselves creatively in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be way different than Meat Boy, and I don't believe there'll ever be another Meat Boy. I believe the book is closed, and Meat Boy is what it is. I'm not a fan of doing sequels. I think that sequels tend to cheapen the initial experience. There's a lot of classic games out there that I really love that basically have become shitty in my mind because of all the sequels. And one of the good examples, like Tony Hawk. Like, first two Tony Hawks were really good, and nobody thinks about them as really great games at this point because they've just been so hit by the amount of sequels and knockoffs and everything else that they did to juice that. But the first two Tony Hawk games were really, really good, and they were not like anything else. Really good games. Another good example is Tomb Raider. The first Tomb Raider, like, holy shit, that game was amazing, and it was so ahead of its time. Like, it was a really, really good game. But then they just, basically crapped out a million other versions of it, and you lose sight.
I wonder, like, it's weird how it happens this way in games, where it's because it's like software development. It's almost like a different version in the same program. Like, they'll release, Tomb Raider 2, and it has slightly better graphics and slightly tighter controls or something. They're just iterating, through the same design. And it's one of those weird things that sort of makes games feel like less of an actual creative medium and more like just a technical thing. Because it's like, this is the latest, whatever.
It's all business logic. It's the logic that is, hey, we've got this engine. Okay, well, we don't want to buy an engine. We don't pay a bunch of new people. I mean, look at fucking Rockstar, dude. They've been running off like the same basic engine for forever. Like, they get away with murder. Like what was it? First two 3D Grand Theft Autos, Manhunt, Bully, and countless. There was a bunch of other ones in the PS2 era, but they were just using the same damn engine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're basically making the same kind of games, and they're just juicing it for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, it's business. It's business. You sell. Logically, if me and Tommy were only focused on money, we'd be working on Meat Boy 2 right now. We'd be laying the foundation for the sequel, so we could juice that, because logically, if it did well, and the IP's up, you want to juice that. Yeah, it's just the way of making money. But yeah,
I find it weird how some indie developers.
I'm not as much.
Oh, sorry. I find it weird that some indie developers are like focused on creating a new thing every time. Like, even if there's similarities between their games, they're trying to they're not doing sequels, or they're going somewhere else, and they're trying to explore a new space. And there's other indie developers that have a much more sort of traditional mainstream type mindset. They're like, well, we got something good, now we have to exploit it, and that's just what you do in business. And it's kind of interesting how there's this divide between people who are sort of want to really care about the creative, I guess, honesty of things, and people who are in it to make a buck still, and they're more into it for the business freedom than the creative freedom, perhaps. Or sort of mixing it a bit more, so it's like, I came up with this great idea, now I need to milk it so I can generate maximum income from it, and that kind of thing. I guess that's sort of one of the things that makes the indie biz list kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm not part of the indie business at this point anymore. There's a lot of stuff like in business that just kind of I don't know. It's messy. You can't avoid if you mix business and creativity,
Yeah.
it gets messy, and you can't avoid it. It taints things. It does, and I still find, the games that I play that are the most, kind of unbridled and honest and inspiring are games that obviously had no thought at all about how to sell something. Mostly they're free. It's like, and there's a lot to that. When you go in never thinking that you're going to make a dime off something, you tend to loosen up. You really loosen up. You stop thinking about who am I marketing to? Who's going to play this game? How am I going to sell it? All that sort of stuff too. Once you get into the business mindset of making money off something, it's impossible to ignore that. I mean, I guess especially when you're doing a console game, logically you have to keep that stuff in mind too, because you've got other people investing in you as well.
Yeah.
And then of course it gets hard, but I can't say that one of the things I worried about going into console development was, am I going to have to compromise my integrity here? Am I going to have to change things to appease my boss? I'm doing air quotes around the boss.
Right.
And I was really worried. I was worried that I was going to get censored. I was worried this and that. Early on, I did that ad, the Hitler ad. I don't know if you saw that one. This Meat Boy Hitler ad where it said, like, Hitler was a vegetarian, don't be like Hitler, and it had this bovine chart. And that, in a lot of ways, was us, or I guess me, I don't want to blame Tommy, but kind of testing the waters, and it's like, I want to, I'm taking a risk here. I want to see what the reaction is. And the reaction really wasn't bad, and Nintendo just said, if you're going to mention Hitler in an ad, don't put the WiiWare logo in it. Make it your own, make it your own thing. Don't say that we're involved in that. And that was really refreshing. And working with Microsoft has been really awesome for the most part. Our producer is a really, really cool guy. Understands the game and is a fan of the game, and it was really easygoing. And we never felt pressured to remove anything. We didn't remove anything. We never felt pressure to add anything other than, of course, the things that we signed that we would, like achievements and stuff like that.
So
they just stepped back and let us, do our thing, and that's been really refreshing. And obviously, they know pushing in too much is going to affect the whole point of this. They didn't sign us because they thought that we would do what we're told. They signed us because they wanted us to do exactly what we were doing.
Right.
And so that's really cool. And going through that
seems rare to me, though.
I mean, it could be. We could have gotten lucky. This is my only experience with console development, so I don't know how it goes for other people.
Yeah, I think maybe once you've gotten to the point where you have a defined style, sort of, and you have a bit of reputation, it might be different than if it's like your first big project or something, and they might treat you a little differently. I'm not sure. One thing I wanted to ask you about is just collaborators. The idea of, like, I know for me, I'm not into really making stuff by myself. I find it just creatively boring and not fun, and it just sort of becomes work at some point where I'm like, well, if I'm just doing this for myself, then I can just imagine it. I don't need to actually make it. But working with other people is really neat because you can go back and forth on ideas and throw them around, and they become much more interesting and stuff like that. But the problem with that is you need to find really great people to collaborate with, which seems like the hardest thing to do. It seems like there's great creative people everywhere, but finding the ones where you really match up and you complement each other and you cover all the different skills you need to make a game and all that stuff, it seems really tricky, and it seems to be getting harder and harder for me to trust people because of some bad experiences I've gone through with people and sort of throwing my trust into a creative partnership and having it not pay off at all and having stupid things happen and all that. So
yeah, I've been through. I mean, I'm in a situation where I can't even make games by myself. Like,
right.
I don't program at all, so I don't have the ability to do it alone. So it's always been a requirement. for me, working with other people was, a way to be social in a lot of ways and kind of make friends and
Yeah.
and whatever else. And I guess I kind of lucked out in a lot of ways doing small Flash games. I never took more than a couple months to finish a game. So whoever I was working with, if things started getting a little old,
Right.
That would be the end of it. Like we finished the game and that's that. And I've had bad experiences with working with people. I've had horrible experiences working with some people, but I think it's just I can't help but design around the person, I guess. Like usually every game that I make with a certain person has a lot to do with them, like
Right.
the kind of person that they are, what they're interested in as well, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And like when I worked with Alex, all the games we did were physics-based games because that was his strength, and a lot of the design work that I did designed around what I knew that he did really well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and it was cool. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's no answer to anything as far as like how to find somebody that you can work well with. I really honestly just lucked out with Tommy. It's he's somebody that I really got along with really well. I felt really comfortable with. A lot of the people I've worked with in the past have worked out really well too. But I guess I kind of luck out too with a lot of the people that I've worked with recently when it comes to Flash development were other developers that contacted me because they said they were inspired by Gish. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm a programmer. And they showed me a few prototypes and I'm like, well, you want to make something in a couple weeks? We'll just bust something out. So I think they kind of already went in knowing the kind of person I was.
Right. Yeah.
So something I say or do wouldn't completely turn them off to what we were doing. They kind of knew what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of knew me from a distance, and that's how I think it might have worked. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy working with different people. I enjoy it's the only way I have to learn how other people see things. It's the best way to. Everybody sees things completely differently. And one of the hardest things to gain as a developer is perspective on how other people understand and view things. And I think working closely with other people and other developers gives you a better understanding of how other people see things.
Yes.
It's a really hard skill to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I've been working on for a while. And I think I've learned a lot, especially with Meat Boy, because you're forced to get feedback from anonymous people through play testing and whatever else, or forced to watch people play without speaking and have other developers and whatever else give you actual feedback and learning to take that feedback. There's a weird situation with Microsoft. They kind of do, I wouldn't say focus testing, but they have a group of people kind of test and play the game and then they give their feedback on it. And it was like, I wouldn't call it really negative, but it was pretty weird. And
right.
it initially was quite hard to take because you've got a lot of people that are, number one, they're not even used to this kind of game. Number two, this is their job, so it's a job and they're treating it as a job, and they're kind of giving feedback on stuff like humor, which is kind of mind blowing, And it threw me, it threw me a lot. But then I kind of learned, it was a big learning experience for me. I learned how to look at it from afar and kind of see what everybody was saying and what things had in common, because you got to learn to throw away certain things that are uncommon. Like if one person says, I think it's not funny when you kill the squirrel, and then nobody else says that, but then everybody else is saying, I didn't collect Band-Aids because I didn't see the point. Okay, well, there's the problem. That's a big problem that I can't see as a developer, and I have absolutely no perspective on, because while developing the game, I have a very clear picture of what the game is.
Whoa.
I have a clear idea of what the game is and what it's going to be and why things are there and whatever else. And it's really easy to get lost and not understand how other people see things, even if you watch them play. This anonymous feedback, I would have never reinforced Band-Aids at all. I would have released the game without that, and that would have been a horrible thing if there was a majority of people that didn't see the point in collecting Band-Aids. And it was an easy fix. It was just like, okay, obviously people don't understand that when you collect Band-Aids, you unlock things. So what I'll do is on the character select screen, I'll put silhouettes that have the number of Band-Aids you need to unlock the character. And then it's a flat, everybody understands it. It's universal. It's not, I didn't want to pop up text, and that was another thing with design-wise. I didn't want to pop up information. I wanted the game is easy, It's based on the time when you lost the instruction manual and there was no in-game tutorial, so the games had to be easy enough, and the game design had to teach you how to play.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a way where, through design, I was able to instruct the player on, this is what you get for collecting those things. It's right there. Everybody sees it. It's universal, no text, and that was just one of the things that I learned from, having people play and give me anonymous feedback in a way. And Flash games are like that too, where you get this mass amount of response of anonymous feedback, and sometimes it's really, really negative, and sometimes it's really hard to take. But if you're able to kind of blur your eyes and step back and look at all the feedback and see what certain things have in common, if a lot of people are saying, hey, the music sucks, and everybody's saying it, then it's probably because the music sucks. Maybe do something about it. But it's sometimes pretty hard to see that.
I think it's weird when you get feedback. You have to sort of sample it over a large number of people and look at sort of what are the trends, And I think it's easy to get caught up in specific little things that happen to hit you personally. Sometimes somebody will say something that's like, oh, this thing in this game is completely stupid, and you're like, that's the whole point of the game. And it's like, well, if you think it's stupid, I must be doing something horribly wrong, or I must not know how to convey points properly, or maybe I don't come up with interesting points, But it might not be worth worrying about those things if only one or two people out of a group are saying that,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things too where it's like, you're not, as a designer, and I'm sure a lot of people would argue against this. As a designer, I think the best designers are the designers that stay true to what they're doing, but also appeal to the most amount of people as possible. I think that the same goes for filmmakers and artists in general. If you can speak honestly with your work, but also have a lot of people understand it and appreciate it, then I believe that you've done something really right. And every artist wants everybody to understand and appreciate their work. I mean, there's a lot of pretty pretentious artists out there who make stuff that's extremely alienating and high art and whatever else, and I understand the appeal of that. But realistically, I don't think any artist can say honestly that they wouldn't ideally want everybody to be able to appreciate what they're doing.
I don't know. Like I think there are layers to the way people understand things. So for me, like my ideal would be to make something that a lot of people get part of it, and then other people can read into it in different ways, not just in one specific way. But
yeah, I don't mean like understand. I mean appreciate overall.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think every artist, of course, his artwork to be appreciated.
Yeah, and I think a lot of pretentious game developers, what they tend to do is they don't actually have an interesting theme. They just obscure the theme, and the theme itself is actually really boring. But they've just not stated it, and but it's still obvious what it is, it's this weird stage where we haven't. The pretentious people in game design haven't really got to the point where they can be subtle about their stuff yet. Like they don't know how to be subtle about it, but yet people somehow think they are being subtle. And I guess it's a subjective taste thing, but I just find a lot of games are sort of too obvious.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of ways though, I think I even though I'm not a fan, and even though I've done this, even though I'm not a fan of vague messages, cloudy design,
right,
or whatever you want to call it. I can appreciate a lot of the more risky designs, I guess you could say, because in a lot of ways it's kind of laying bricks And it lays a foundation and kind of pushes things out just a bit so other people can kind of fill.
Right.
It makes it okay to go there. Like I'm not a huge fan of Tale of Tales, but
Yeah.
I can appreciate what they're doing because they are pushing things in the direction. Even though I might not believe it's the greatest direction in the world, they're still taking risks. And
Yeah.
someday I might be able to take some of those risks.
The only problem I have with that is they get a lot of praise for as if they've already made it somewhere, you know. And I'm kind of looking at it. I'm kind of looking at what they do, and it's like we haven't actually done anything interesting with game design. All you've done is not, tried to make a game, which is cool. It's totally cool.
Yeah.
I don't think it and I still think their stuff qualifies as being called a game, but they're just consciously not putting goals and stuff necessarily in their game, and that's cool. But to me, that doesn't represent an amazingly new way to make games. It's just sort of like, well, you took out this thing, which is fine. But there should be a way to actually use game design to convey ideas that have multiple interpretations that aren't completely vague. They still have concrete ideas, but they're not being forced down your throat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the short answer to all that is the fact that that's hard.
Yeah, it is very hard, and that's why that's why I keep restarting my game over and over. But
yeah, it's very hard to do, and that's why not everybody's doing it. I mean, I think the game that came the closest was Braid.
Yeah, we'll have to disagree about that one.
A solid game that it's one of those games I think can speak to a mass amount of people, and they don't all need to appreciate every single aspect of the game to appreciate the game.
True.
Yeah. It's still a great game. Like with everything stripped off of it, the story, the meaning, everything stripped off of it, you still got a very great game.
Well, I guess that's why I felt like the story and meaning was not really integral to the game's experience because it was optional and you could strip it off. Yeah,
but realistically though, and this is something else. I think I read this recently and it kind of threw me. Somebody said like if you took this actual text away from Braid, that you wouldn't understand what was going on, and I find that kind of hard to believe because the whole game is based around this guy who's constantly traveling back in time to fix things, and that is what the game is about. It's about a guy who makes a mistake, desperately wants to fix things but can't. He's trying.
Yeah, I never really got that out of playing it, but
that's what I got from it.
I remember stuff about nuclear bombs or something. But.
I think in a lot of ways the text and stuff made it just more cloudy. So I think
right. Well, like the thing is, I was a player who didn't even read the text, and I'm all about stories in games. But because it was optional, I was like, well, I'll read it when I feel like it, and I never felt like it. So
ignoring the text though, you still got a game that ends with you going through to save the princess, and then realizing that you were actually going backwards, and you ended up being the one who chases her back through the game, and then suddenly realize you've been the bad guy, and then it puts the whole game into perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of
like without the text, and just that happening. It's telling a story.
That's sort of my problem with the game, though, is that there was this text that was just there basically to add random obfuscation. I bet John Blow doesn't see it as random, but I see it as just kind of like, hey, here's some story, whatever, and it's like, okay, well, it's pointless. But I mean, everyone's going to see it a bit differently, so that's just sort of my take on it. I'm more interested in something where the story is actually ingrained in what's happening, and you might be arguing that is the case here, and it might be the case in terms of the events, but in terms of the actual way the story is told, there's sort of like this optional extra stuff that doesn't really seem to enhance the core meaning to me or convey it. But, yeah, I think it's really challenging to actually mix these things in a way and tie them together in a way that's actually meaningful. And a lot of people, a lot of gamers have issue when you try to do that. If you actually try and tie the context of the game closely to the gameplay of the game. I've had a lot of people play stuff that I've been doing that tries to do that, and they have this weird allergic reaction to it. And to me, it's confusing because it seems obvious. But
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that I could tell you as far as obsessing about design and wanting certain things to be a specific way and wanting to be able to speak honestly through things and all the big goals, the big really hard speech goals is don't put that much thought into what you're doing and try to let it just come out. If you put too much thought into it, you're going to discourage yourself and you're going to think, this isn't as good as what I thought it was going to be. This isn't as good. I'm not as good. Because the fact of the matter is, there's a good chance that you're not as good yet to do what you want to do, but you maybe will be as good once you finish it.
Well, the other thing is you might be doing something that's still good,
like the experience,
and it's just not as good as what you hoped it would be, but it's still valuable, right? But I have a hard time
finishing things. It's impossible. It's impossible to have perspective while you're doing it. You're never like, hey, oh man, I don't really like the way this is going, but I'm going to finish it and put it out there, even though I don't like it.
Yeah, you can't do that with a giant game.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't recommend that enough.
Right.
Just trying your best to loosen up and not overthink it, because I think it's human nature for us to.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Scenario and apart things and think this isn't good enough, and I've got to do it better, so I've got to scrap it.
Yeah, but I think it helps when you have people around you who can encourage you. Like if you're collaborating with people who get what you're trying to do, it's like a million times easier to do something that people aren't immediately understanding. So,
yeah, well, it's validating. It's validation.
Yeah, so I'm a person that needs to have that sort of feedback. It's like, no, this is actually good. Even though a bunch of other people think it's shit, we think it's good. So let's do it. Now, I don't think I have that currently on the project I'm working on, and that's why it gets really hard to continue, because it's just sort of me saying, well, I think this is going to be good, and I don't have anybody around close to me who's a game designer who's saying, yeah, I can see exactly that this is going to work out and be great,
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of like a really shitty place to be in, because it's just sort of like, oh, I have to wake up today and tell a bunch of artists what to do. And
I mean, that's one of the downfalls of making a big game. Like,
yeah, and I've tried to.
It's very ambitious. It's very ambitious. It's hard to take risks. It's hard to take risks and then not second guess yourself and then think that you compromised the whole piece because of a risk took, or it might not, But all I'm saying is I think there's a lot in the experience, and I mean, for me personally, I know I'm not as good as I want to be in a lot of aspects, and that's not something that's discouraging to me at all. It's something that gives me hope for the future. If I really felt like I was the shit and I could design the best game in the world and I was the best artist, there would be absolutely no point in me doing anything, because I would have already hit my limit. What would I have to grow from? Like, nothing.
Yeah, so that's a very positive way to look at it.
Well, it's the only, I mean, basically, it's the only way to look at it.
It might be,
You can either think of yourself as, this is as good as I'm going to get. This is my wall. And I don't know how horrible, that's a horrible, horrible thought.
It is a horrible thought.
It's like, we're young. Even though we have some experience, we are still quite inexperienced, even as people. Even with the life experience that we have, there's no way that we understand how things really are, and our experiences and our ideas and everything are going to change dramatically as we grow. So it's best, I think, to just push stuff out there, get it done, learn from it, and move on. We're not going to be happy with every single thing that we do for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, there has to be a certain level of happiness. Like there has to be there's a threshold here where there's sort of like being completely unhappy and just not wanting to release something at all, versus being happy enough, versus being completely happy, which will never happen. So the battle is always to try and get the thing to the point where you're happy enough with it,
Yeah.
It's not going to ever hit your amazing goal. It's never going to be the perfect game. But getting it to the point where you're like, I'm okay with releasing this, even though it's not the best thing ever, I will release it. Yeah. And a lot of people will still love it, and all that. But to me, it's been constantly sort of battling with getting to the point where I'm happy enough, and that's been frustrating. But
I mean, again, this is another downfall of a large game. Like,
the
more time you spend on something, the more you're going to see flaws. this happened for me with Meat Boy. And one of the things that actually kept it interesting and kept it going was how loosely me and Tommy design things. It's like if things started to get boring, Tommy would implement something else that would change everything, or we would put a new character, and it would change everything, and it would breathe life into the experience, and that is, realistically, Meat Boy is, even though it's a really huge game, it's not as huge or ambitious as something like what you're trying to do, like an adventure story-driven game like that. Like this is still, Meat Boy is still a very formulaic game.
The advantage of like a platformer with levels is you can compartmentalize things. You can be like, okay, this is the running and jumping system, and once it works, it works, and then you can apply it to all these other things, And the problem with making a game where things are trying to tie together really heavily is if one piece doesn't work, then the whole house of cards comes tumbling down, right? So that's the frustrating part. But I've been working lately on a couple of small side projects that just are completely the opposite on purpose, just so I can work on something that's not, heavily interdependent. And it's just, that's nice. Because that's like how most people make games, I think, is it's just like, oh, we'll just work on some gameplay, and then we'll make it fun, and then we'll put some graphics on it, and there we go. Here's a game, and it's like, you're able to be a lot more free with it because you can just prototype the game with whatever graphics. It doesn't matter because the context doesn't matter at all, really. And you can just make these fun little mechanics and play around with them, and yeah. So I don't know, but I still feel like there's this extra value to something where the context is actually important, And I think you've done projects where that's the case, I think context is still important in Meat Boy, but maybe not as important as like Coil or Ether or something, like where the game is sort of about its meaning more.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I wouldn't say that I got over it, but I think I got over the idea of people understanding it.
Sweet.
Like the last game I did that had a really personal message and meant a lot to me personally was Time Fuck, and I don't think anybody will ever fully understand what I was talking about, because the only way to do so would have been to live the life I was living for the year that I was, going through that situation. And I think vaguely, people can appreciate it and appreciate the message in it and appreciate the fact that the gameplay was attempting to mirror something that I was talking about. But realistically, I don't care. I don't care if people don't get it as long as they're enjoying it, because I believe that something will be there underlined that they can appreciate and think that it's offering them something that maybe they're not getting in other games.
Yeah.
I still believe that the game has soul and heart, and that is good enough for me. Like I'm not. If I went around obsessing over everybody appreciating everything that I put in and every message that I put into my games, what I was saying, I would be very unhappy, because there's no way for everybody to understand.
Yeah.
Realistically, a lot of people just don't care either way. So that's, I'm fine with that. I still want to make games like that, and I still am going to make games. I can't not make games about my personal life and personal experiences. I think that's impossible. But at this point, I don't care as much that people
get it in the same way that you get it.
Yeah, it's just I don't think it's.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's like not.
I don't think they need to. That's
you don't need to.
I don't think they need to. I don't think they need to fully understand what I was getting at, and if.
It's interesting because I actually
get it at all.
I actually brought that up. I heard you had that artist talk at the IGS with Derek and Ben and that, and you mentioned that you were frustrated that people weren't getting the messages that you're putting in your stuff. And I actually addressed that at a talk in Iowa, and I said Edmund is frustrated that he can't get the things out of what he wants, but to me it's like that doesn't make sense because everyone's just going to see something different,
Yeah,
and I think it's really interesting that you've gotten past that and you're sort of okay with the fact that people see it differently.
Yeah, I think Meat Boy in a lot of ways helped me get past that, where it was like realistically, everybody in the world is going to see this game as just a fun, weird game.
Mm-hmm.
They're never going to see it as a mirror of me and when we were young. They're never gonna. No one's gonna. I say the majority of people aren't even gonna see it as a satire on video games.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is,
I think the majority of people are just gonna see.
There will be some people that get that though, and that's always the cool thing is, whenever you release something, the people who like it will be attracted to it, and you'll have some hardcore fans that will actually tell you things, and it's surprising how accurate they are sometimes about, this feels like this was happening. It's like, you're totally right. I remember there's this girl that started a fan group for my music or something, and I was like talking to her, and I was like, what do you like about the music? Why do you like it so much or whatever in Aquaria? And she was like, well, it sort of makes me feel sad and depressed, but in sort of an okay way or something. And it was like, holy shit. I was totally depressed when I was writing most of that music, and this is the person that's starting a fan group, and it's like, well, that's crazy. That message actually got through to somebody through this crazy medium where everything gets obfuscated. Yeah. Somehow there was something.
I've heard John actually. Yeah, I've heard John actually say the same thing where he says that people have come up to him and told him the exact idea behind Braid and really what he meant, and he was pretty blown away by it and felt good, of course. And the same things have happened to me. There's always going to be people out there that can relate, and I guess in a lot of ways that's kind of that's the point. When I made Coil, which isn't. It's hard to say I'm really proud of it, but it was definitely a learning experience for me because it was one of the most, I guess you could say, artsy-fartsy type games that I did that was more obviously artsy,
right.
Directly artsy. That game was I don't even know what to say. It was a learning experience. And in a lot of ways, it was for me learning how not to do things and not to use vagueness as a crutch, and how to try to speak more clearly through what I'm trying to say. And there were actually a few people that kind of got the message. But the thing is it didn't matter either way because it was so fucking vague. It could apply to anything.
Right.
It was like the Bible. It's just super, super vague.
Right.
Anybody could take anything from it and read into it. And I found that appealing initially, and it was actually something that I capitalized on, and I kind of feel guilty for at this point, where I'm like, yeah, it was intentionally made that way, when realistically it was quite specific, but it was something that it was basically in code and something that only I could understand, but I just glommed onto, it applies to so many different things, and, come up with your own solution sort of thing, because it made it like It was a puzzle in itself. But
yeah, I guess
realistically, that was just a crutch.
I think the ideal.
I was learning,
I think the ideal, I guess, in there is somewhere in between those two things, where there's specific stuff that you're exploring, but you're not forcing it you're not forcing it too much, and you're also not leaving it too ambiguous. There's sort of like a sweet spot, I guess.
Yeah, they're for sure. But I honestly think that sweet spot has a lot to do with just developing honestly.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're developing honestly, you can't really go too wrong. You can't, if somebody is totally like, oh, this makes me feel terrible, then it's like, well, that's because I felt terrible when I was making it, And it's like, there's a certain amount of value to that just in the fact that it's honest, and even if it's something people hate, it could still be a valuable experience to play through it because it's like representing something that actually happened. And yeah, I don't know. It's always just a weird thing figuring out, why you're doing something to me. Like if for projects that stretch on for many years, there's sort of like a reason you started working on something and particular feelings and personal stuff, and then a year or two later, that might be completely different. You might have a completely different outlook on life. Yeah. And then it's like, well, this doesn't apply anymore. And then you have to sort of rediscover the game, and you have to sort of look at it through the new lens that you have and be like, oh, well, now this means this, and this means that. And so then you have to resort the whole thing, and that's the problem with developing in that way, is that you can't fake it. Like if you're developing gameplay, purely gameplay, and you're not worried about the meaning or the context or whatever else, right? It's just gameplay for fun. Then that's your only metric. You just have to make something and test against people and see if it's fun, and that's hard enough. But doing something personal, it's like, no, everything has to line up in a way that matches this particular feeling, and that gets difficult because you're also trying to do something that a lot of people complain and get into. And there's compromises and really tough decisions you have to make about things that you'll add or things that you'll lose, and it becomes a really complicated sort of dilemma, unfortunately. But.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the whole designing, loosely designing so things can seep in.
Yeah.
For projects that take a long time, if you make them really rigid and make them have a message or one specific thing that you might not even be feeling a year from now, it's going to be hard for you to finish the game.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of let it adapt. And I actually heard. So when I got involved with Braid, the game actually had a different ending, and it had a very specific ending. I don't think it's something John would want me to even be talking about, so I won't. But so it had a specific ending, and it was way more direct, and it was something I really liked. And I remember telling John that it was one of the things I liked the most about the game was the overall story. And then he changed it, and I asked him why, and he said he changed it because it didn't have the same meaning it did, years ago.
Yeah.
So he wanted to apply other things in his life to it. That had relevance. And I think a lot of games do that. I know even though TimeFuck's development schedule was maybe 2 months max, the game started out with like this vague, it's really weird, this vague idea based around my high school reunion experience, which had a lot to do with kind of running into all these people that seemed so stuck back in time.
Right.
And kind of stuck in these boxes that they've made for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was depressing. It was a depressing experience, and everybody was drinking, a lot of people were crying, and everybody was just talking about how basically miserable they were.
Wow.
Sounds
great.
It was horrible. Like, it was one of those things where, of course I wasn't the most popular kid in school and everything, and they were always, there's always people that you want to show up,
Yeah.
And the day that happened, I remember having, it was the day that we got into Nintendo Power, and they did like a 2-page spread article that was an interview with me and Tommy, and our pictures were in it, and I had it in the car, and it was going to be this thing where, like, if people were going to be giving me shit,
right.
I'd break it out, and that was going to be my proof that like I've done something,
right?
And no, like instantly when I got in there, I was like, holy shit, like everybody's miserable. And it was so depressing. It was so weird, and it was frustrating in a lot of ways too, because a lot of these people were people that I liked, and they seemed so stuck in these old ideals and these lifestyle ideas that they've decided to live in.
There's these. I've been noticing that, like,
I've
been noticing like a lot of people that I know from high school have just been getting married and having kids, like, already, and I'm 26, I guess, but in the last couple of years, like, it seems like everyone that I see on Facebook, I barely know them, but it's just like, oh, they got married and they do this job now, and it's like, wow, they're going to be stuck somewhere.
No, yeah, it's a weird thing too, and I hate talking about it, especially publicly, because it seems so elitist to talk about, like,
right.
other people's life choices, of course. But no, it's the thing that was depressing to me mostly was the fact that it seemed like they were unhappy because they felt like they had made choices that they could not find any sort of solutions to, when it seemed like all they needed was simple perspective on the situation for them to see that they had options.
Oh, right,
And they didn't have to retire with this lifestyle. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
but that's
this
what
was
high school is all about to me. Was about trying to put people into boxes. It was like you're either supposed to be one of these three groups, and it's like I don't feel like I'm in any of those groups. You know, like
yeah.
like and
But
doesn't feel like any of these other people should be in these groups either. It just feels like they should be just themselves. You know, and it seems like a lot of people get stuck in that mindset. So it seems like a high school reunion is just like the scariest possible.
It was
idea.
weird.
Like most sort of.
It was weird. I mean, the thing that I kept getting was every single person that talked to me said, I didn't think you'd go to something like this. And then I remember thinking, what? Why?
Yeah.
What?
Because you were labeled as
the
whatever guy, you know. You had some kind of label associated, and that's all they saw you as, you know. And that, to me, is the most depressing thing about certain social situations is when people get labeled. And then it's like if you get labeled, then you're like, well, how am I supposed to, like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to act this way now because that's what people expect? Or am I just supposed to be myself even though people are going to interpret it a different way because they think I'm, you know, supposed to be some kind of person that I'm not, you know? Like, I just hate anything like that. And the reason when the indie scene works well, you have a bunch of people that just respect each other for who they are in a room together, and that's great. You know, and when it doesn't work well, it falls into the same kind of cliques and bullshit that high school does, where, oh, you make art games, so you're in the art game group, you know, or you make these type. It's like, no, that's defeating the whole purpose of being independent, of being able to just make whatever you want, and having a baseline respect of just, I respect that you made this thing that you think is cool. I may not like it, but, you know, it's cool that you made it, you know, and to me that just seems like a basic thing that mature adults should be able to do, and it seems like even in the indie scene there's a lot of just bullshit.
Yeah. I think you've been misinformed on mature adults. I don't I think that quite the majority of people in the scene are not really full-on adults.
I mean, I've lucked out that I know a bunch of people in the indie scene that fit that idea of what I think a mature adult should be. And it's wonderful to hang out with those people because we can joke about stuff, but at the same time there's a baseline understanding of, I see what you're doing, you know, and I think it's cool. And even though I may not agree with it, that's neat, you know. And then there's this other area of the scene that just seems to be like contentious debates about the stupidest things that don't matter, and status envy and all that other crap. So I remember talking to you before about how you hate, you know, like game conferences and being around other people in a big group and stuff like that. And I don't know if this is like too personal or anything. I can't say
I hate it.
Oh, but it feels awkward.
I think I would. I want that. Like, I wish I could function like a normal person. I can go to these conventions and be always social with, you know, no kind of anxiety and talk. But it's not really an option for me at this point. So,
what is the experience like for you? Because I like being around people and stuff. About this thing where, like, if things tend to go in a certain direction, if something becomes too negative, then I sort of completely tune out and I get really frustrated and I just need to leave because it's just too stupid.
For me, it's the anxiety going in. That is the most frightening for me. A lot of my anxiety, panic attack stuff stems from being out of my comfort zone, kind of feeling, I guess, out of my element. Once I'm in it, my brain will be tricked into forgetting.
Right.
Actually, once I'm in it, I'm fine. And I think I had a conversation with somebody recently, and they asked about this too, and they were like, you know, I saw you at GDC and you seemed fine. And it's because I totally had forgotten about everything.
Right. But, so for you, it's more like
a
pre thing where it's like in advance and you're anticipating stuff, but once you get into it, you're okay.
Yeah. Once I get past that, I'm okay for the most part. Once I'm in it, like, I'll be okay, and I usually don't shake it once I'm in it. Like, getting to that point is really, really hard for me.
Right.
Like, to the point, like, like GD, like I'm not going to do the IGF again, and not necessarily because of any reason other than it's really stressful for me, for many reasons. But the biggest reason for me is the fact that if I make it to the finals, 4 months, when they announce it or whatever, before it actually happens, I'll start having major anxiety about worrying about having to get enough sleep, be comfortable where I'm staying, getting up, the temperature of the room, like
Wow, okay.
the amount of people in the room,
Mm-hmm.
If I have eaten food, if I'm going to be sick, like, and this will happen really, really early on. It's like, for me, and I guess it goes back to the reason why I feel like improvised things and spur of the moment stuff is so important in life for me because it's so comfortable. The mystery of not knowing how things are going to go at all without having any idea of what I need to do is very appealing for me because that means I'm fully functional. If you told me today that I'm going to get on a plane and fly to Hawaii, I'd be fine with it because I wouldn't have any time to worry about it.
Right,
but if you told me that I'm going to get on a plane tomorrow, then I would not sleep. I would not be able to sleep tonight. I would not be able to relax. I would feel like I'm having a panic attack. I would start to probably feel like I'm having heart problems. Like I become this super hypochondriac that starts being hypersensitive to every little ache and pain in my body. I'm unable to sleep, and I obsess about every little possible thing that could happen negatively.
It's really interesting because it's sort of like you wonder if it would be possible to argue yourself into a state where you're like, well, I'll just pretend like I don't know it's going to happen. And
yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, I imagine it doesn't.
Tell you how this GDC worked actually. So I wasn't going to go because I was losing it. I think I was just having panic attacks constantly, thinking about having to get up and go there, drive there, with enough sleep. I have bad insomnia, so I have a hard time sleeping in general and getting enough sleep. And when I don't get enough sleep, I feel really horrible and I get panic attacks. So I was really freaking out about it. And what happened was I woke up the day before I was going to go. And I noticed, and I think Danielle noticed that I felt fine. And she suggested that we go that day. And we did, and then it was fine.
Interesting.
So it was just one of those situations where I was like, if I felt fine and I tricked myself into doing it.
Yeah.
But you can't that tricks. I can't trick myself into it. It has to be
you need somebody else outside of you to trick yourself into.
Yeah, but that's what's wrong with me. But I'm getting better. I mean, GDC was actually the first time I've slept out of my house in like 6 years. Like I've kind of had the inability to sleep in hotels and stuff because I won't feel at ease enough to sleep, and then of course if I don't sleep, then I'm really fucked. But yeah, that's just what I have to deal with.
So I guess you'd never be able to sort of like make it out to a game jam or anything like that for the same kind of reasons. Like it would just be too much of that kind
possibly. Like that's the thing. Like right now, like I know there's the Mountain View game jam. Yeah. I'd really like to do that. But number one, I don't have a fucking functional car, so I'd have to borrow a car. But I'm not thinking about it at all right now.
It's a good plan, yeah. Day before.
Yeah, if I wake up and I feel fine and it happens to be on the day that it's going and I can borrow a car, then sure, I'll drive up there and I'll be fine.
Sweet.
But I don't like worrying about the anticipation. Like, the idea of the day before launch of the Xbox version, I know that's going to be hellish.
Right.
I'll tell you right now that it's going to be bad.
Cool. Well, I think it's interesting that, like, I guess one of the things I've also been thinking about in terms of the idea of independence is, being able to do things yourself versus being able to requiring other people to help you with things. And I have a problem where if I can't do something myself, I'll beat myself up and make myself feel like crap. It's sort of like as if I had like a really nasty gym coach in my head yelling at me constantly, being like, "No, are you some kind of pussy? You should be able to do this," which is not helpful. But to some degree, I need people to tell me that things are okay, that, stuff's going to work out. I can tell myself that, and I don't believe myself. because I can be very cynical and stuff. So
Yeah.
I find it interesting
it's easy to lie to yourself. I've gone through situations like that too, where it's like, if I'm left alone with my own thoughts and I have nobody else to bounce them off of or feel a kind of validation for what I'm thinking or anything like that, it turns into doom and gloom quite instantly.
Yeah.
And I can come up with the worst possible scenario of the what ifs,
yeah.
And then that's the end of it. Like when I was very poor and doing I was trying to do games, but I was also doing freelance art to pay the bills, and I would obsess over money, and I would stay up at night thinking, like, I would calculate how much money I have, how much money I could live off of if I possibly didn't get any work, and then I would be waking Danielle up seconds later saying, "We're fucked. It's over. It's we're not gonna, in 2 months we're not gonna have any money, and I don't foresee any work coming in." Because of course I'm only thinking about those negative things.
So how does Danielle deal with that? And I just want to kind of randomly interject a story here, because before I renew you, I saw you like a video or a story about you winning the Seamus McNally Award and proposing to Danielle or whatever. I remember thinking that was really cool. This was sort of before I knew that you could actually make indie games and that would be successful, and I was going through a phase where, like, a lot of my friends were like, well, if you're not going to make mainstream games, then what's the point? Because you can't make money, making, like, spiderweb software type games or whatever. And so it was just kind of neat, because it was like, oh, here's a dude who just, won this thing, and he's proposing to his girlfriend. That's, like, the coolest thing ever. But I'm just kind of curious, like, again, if any of this gets too personal, let me know. But how Danielle deals with sort of all your anxiety stuff that obviously is something you guys have to deal with to get through life. Like, it's not.
I could ask her since she's sitting behind me.
Sweet, yeah, that'd be awesome.
How do you deal with it?
Calm.
How do you deal with it? Can you hear her at all?
Oh, I can't hear her, but if she could get the mic or something, it'd be cool.
I don't know how I deal with it. I mean, I just try and be as supportive as I can, because I have my own stuff that is weird, and when I feel like that, he is just as supportive to me. So I think it's just, we just treat each other how we want to be treated, and that's how we deal with it, because one of us is going to need each other the next time, so better be nice.
So you're kind of like propping each other up, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's adorable.
That's why our relationship works so much, is because we need almost exactly the same thing, and we give it to each other.
Right. So do you have similar sort of, like, just insecurities? Is that sort of how it works, and then it's just sort of canceling?
Yeah, I don't know if that is just like, if that's like an artist thing, like not thinking that you're good enough and that kind of stuff, and then maybe, I don't know if I was like this before, and Ed has pushed his, like, weird anxiety stuff onto me, or if I would have been like that anyways.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it might be contagious.
We've been going out since I was really young, and we're together 24/7, so it's like hard to tell who is like that. Are we both like that? Did I get that from you, or did I get the crazy idea for myself?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with lifestyle as well. We tend to both isolate, and and that the stuff that comes with that, you start becoming less and less tolerant of the outside world. It's hard for us to go to movies without getting, or at least me, without getting upset with other people in the movie theater.
I just yell at them, so
how
that's
people are
pretty
doing
satisfying.
things. I know that doesn't help anything, because then you put yourself into it, just dwell on it for the rest of the day and be pissed off. But no, I think when you isolate, you just become very sensitive.
Yeah.
To shitty people in the world. And that's the one thing like working a 9-to-5 job does, where like when you're working a 9-to-5 job, you're forced to be with people you don't like, and you just get used to it. So with us, it's like I've been locked away with Danielle for all of Meat Boy development, and we haven't really gone anywhere. And now we're starting to go places, and it's like, oh, can we go home now? Like the slightest little thing could just ruin it for us. Where it's like, oh man, it's much safer inside, and now you don't have to fucking deal with a bunch of bullshit from other people and their opinions and everything else like that.
So do you guys ever go through like anxiety at the same time? Because the system of a relationship where each partner supports each other when they're going through shit makes sense, as long as you're taking turns going through shit. But if you both go through shit at the same time, what happens? Like, how do you work it out?
Explosion.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems like whatever, for the most part, whoever is having it worse, the other person will like come down to earth immediately and try and fix it. Right.
Yeah. So yeah. So you kind of snappy. One of the by seeing your partner sort of go deeper, you sort of snap yourself out of it, and you're like, wait, we have to stop this or something like that.
Yeah, but there's definitely been times where I'm not available, like, emotionally or mentally to help at all, and I have to say, you need something from me that I can't give you right now. Right. So this is a fucked up day, sorry.
Yeah, I think Chrissy and I go through sort of a similar thing, and it does come down to those times when it's just like, there's a limit, where somebody's just tired and they can't deal with it, and it's interesting that just like a really difficult situation to try and deal with at the time. But how do you guys look at it in the long run? Like, do you sort of look at it as do you sort of accept that it happens, or is it more sort of like, oh, I hope this doesn't happen again, kind of thing? Like, have you sort of become comfortable with it?
I don't think it ever gets completely comfortable, but it's just something you deal with, and we accept that things, sometimes things get hard and sometimes things get easy. Mm-hmm. We've been through a lot. I mean, we've been together for a really long time, and around the time that you saw that I proposed to Danielle, we were living in like a room. We were paying of course, Santa Cruz is quite expensive, but I think Canada is really expensive anyway. But we were paying like $550 a month for a room in like this big Victorian home with shitloads of other people that lived there. It was kind of like a college dorm situation, and I didn't have a job at the time, and I was just working on Gish. Well, I guess it was my job, but I didn't have income. And Danielle worked at a dog grooming place, and she was actually the one supporting us through the 6 to 8 months of development on Gish before I actually even started making any money off of it. Mm-hmm. And then years later, once I started making enough money to pay for the place that we're at now, I was able to just basically tell her to quit her job and focus on her own projects, and that was about, how many years ago was that?
2 years ago. 2
years ago, and since then she's been able to actually make just as much off of her art that she would have.
Really cool.
So it's just it's a back and forth situation.
Yeah, for us, if it wasn't like totally equal, and definitely not the kind of person that would just be giving, and a bottomless pit. Like, I get refills after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the new deal right now is because of course Danielle had to go through Meat Boy development as well, which was insanely stressful for her on top of everything else. The deal was that she gets a hairless cat after we move out of this place. So that was the deal there.
That'll make up for everything.
Yep. Well, for sure, it seems like it'd be the ultimate thing in life. So
it is the ultimate thing in life.
So that's the agreement.
I mean, that is like the cherry on top. I get to spend like just watching a movie now without him like having to get up and go back to work. Just watching a movie on the couch is like delightful because we'd eat in 15 minutes and he'd have to get up and go back to work.
Right. Yeah. It always gets really, really weird in those crunch periods where it's just impossible for someone to take time out of their schedule to spend, and it causes all this weird disconnect and feelings and things, and it's
really bizarre how you can get used to it, because like I know like during the time where then it gets into the super long crunch, and I remember this happening with Gish and like other games, there will be little fights as you're like trying to adjust this, and then by the end I'm like totally content being on my own and like doing everything by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we slowly have spent more time like not used to like not being completely alone and just on the computer for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how those things sort of go in cycles where you're in a relationship and you're dependent on each other, but at some point work comes in and you have to become a bit more independent of each other for a while, and then you go back to being, it's just fascinates me how those things sort of all go in cycles, and it's not really consistently the same thing.
Yeah, it's all relative too, because we're like in this time where I'm saying I'm totally alone. We are 4 feet from each other, but our backs are to each other. So
right. So you're still in the same space, but you're not necessarily, doing something together.
Yeah.
Cool.
The cool thing having her here, of course, is that she's been the #1 playtester of Meat Boy from the very beginning, and
mm-hmm.
she's very honest. And even though she doesn't play a ton of video games, she still, has enough experience with them to be like, I don't like the way this feels. And the other thing too is she was the deciding factor in a lot of arguments that me and Tommy were having, where it's like, I'm not sure if this feels good enough. Like there are these things called orbs, which happen later in the game, and it's just a new mechanic for the game. And there are these orbs that suck you in. We call them gravity orbs. They pull you towards them. And me and Tommy were just struggling with the idea of like, should we cut this? Because we both knew that it just didn't feel right. It didn't seem logical, and we couldn't figure it out. And Danielle played it for a while, and she's like, well, shouldn't they push you away? And I guess, realistically, me and Tommy were thinking about it differently, and to most people who would play it, they would think that these things would push you outwards.
Yeah, plus I'm looking at it from, like, on the couch the whole time that they're talking about this, and, like, putting it into the game, and I'm thinking, that looks like a fluffy thing that you should jump on.
Right.
So that was, her playtesting and her feedback eventually turned those things into detractors, which pushed you away, and which makes more sense, and actually worked a lot better with you.
So it's really valuable to have somebody that's...
And just stuff like that. It's just,
Yeah, it's like important to have somebody who's sort of invested, but also on the outside, that it isn't aware of all the things that are going on, so you can get that outside perspective, but it's still a perspective you trust.
But is not, like, so in it that they're blind to certain stuff.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys, you're both going to be in Indie Game the Movie, I'm guessing, and I think I'm supposed to be in it too or something, but I've worked with James and Lizanne before, and I know them pretty well, so I was curious what you guys thought about working with them and stuff.
They're pretty awesome. It's pretty inspiring. It's always really cool to have, like, another creative team that is kind of paralleling what you're doing, like seeing them work so hard for their own project, regardless of it having anything to do with what we're working on, is pretty inspiring because they're really good at it and they seem really passionate about it, and it's just kind of cool to see.
Yeah,
I am a firm believer that if you are really passionate, really driven, that you'll be successful, and even beyond financially. Like overall, I think people will appreciate what you have to offer and what you're trying to say, and they seem to be going all out for it. So I'm really excited to see how it all comes together, and I'm excited to just see, like, because I know they went out and talked to Tommy out in North Carolina and his family and everything, and I'm excited to see that stuff because I've never been over there, and I want to see how his parents are, and all that sort of stuff too. So, I'm invested in it more ways than one, but it's pretty cool. It's inspiring.
I think it's really neat how they're totally indie, and they're making a documentary about indie people. Like they're just two of them. It's just James and Lizanne, and they just cart all their stuff around in like a Yaris.
It's nice because they actually get it. So you feel like when you're talking to them, they get it. So, and I don't have much to compare to, but they're both so nice and genuine, and then they're so good at what they do, and they get such great footage. And then with Sam sitting down talking to you, you just feel like you're at a slumber party, and you just tell her whole life story.
Yeah, we were meeting up with him at a local bar here, and I just started talking to him about everything I was doing, and we weren't filming or anything, but it was just so comfortable to tell them everything that's on my mind. It's kind of like a psychiatrist or something. It's just like pouring out all this personal stuff. But I wanted to bring it up just because it frustrates me to no end some of the feedback that they've got. And, like, it's the kind of feedback that things in the indie scene always get. Like, this just looks too good. This must have been made by...
It's the kind of feedback that you get if you're good. So, I mean, I think that's the only way that you can take it is, obviously, I'm doing something right. Because
it just annoys me because it seems like there's some people that have this impression that somehow they're, like, they've got a crew of, like, 50 people, and they've got, all this money lying around, and they can do it, and it's super easy for them, and it's like they do all their tracking shots by hand on a little stand that they bring around, and they just, like, it's just a shame because I bet if the people who are complaining actually met them, they would be like, oh crap, they're actually totally genuine people. It's like,
well, I think it's also the fact that at this point I don't even, if I'm going to TIG source, I'm usually going just to see how awful people are being, like, which is sad, especially since, of course it's Derek's site, and I feel bad talking trash about it, but it has nothing to do with Derek.
Well, no.
It has to do with the people that are involved. It's a very, very, very negative pit of fucking horribleness. Even though it's an isolated, probably 5 people.
Yeah.
That are posting negative things. But their voices just screams loudly, and it's hard not to avoid them. And it's just like, well, what's the point? But that said, I think I honestly think that the best way to tell if you're doing something right is if you get trolled on TigSource and how much you get trolled on it.
Yeah, how vitriolic it is. Like, I remember seeing something about people raising money to pay for your surgery back when you had to get that stuff, and there was just comments on it that were just like so over the top, like just dehumanizing. And it was like, how did this get to this point where it's you can actually like be wishing death upon another human being when all it is you don't agree with their opinions or you don't particularly like their games? Like, how does it have anything to do with and it makes me wonder how much those people realize what they're saying, like if they actually mean anything by it or if it's just words and they're just throwing out, more violence.
I don't know, like, since I've grown up online and, when Ed had his website, there was that whole BBS situation where we had the same kind of TIG source.
Yeah, we had the mob mentality on a website that I did before I made games.
So not only I've said horrible things that I would never say to somebody in real life, that I would never want them to really take, but I really want it to sting over the internet. So I assume it's just that it's that mentality plus they're young and they're male. So what kind of horrible thing is going to come out of their mouth?
That's it. The funny thing is majority of people, I think, online, especially those who post in forums and those who are male, they get into the alpha male situation, but they do it instead of physically, they do it mentally. So they all think of themselves as very, very intelligent people, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it blows my mind that someone who would think of themselves as intelligent wouldn't understand that it takes more effort to bash somebody than not say anything. And it makes you look like a jealous idiot when you do it. Because there's absolutely no motivation other than jealousy behind posting something negative to knock somebody down. It's as simple as you want to knock them down a peg because you feel compromised by something that they did.
Yeah,
it's like
the transparency of the jealousy on TIG is crazy. That I don't know, because I'm not in it, if I can see it so well, or how they don't see it and then are like completely embarrassed by it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when people are knocking things, it's fairly the language they're using to knock it makes it kind of obvious that they're a developer and they're jealous that somebody else has been getting all this attention. And it seems like that happens a lot. Like there was that whole IGF thread on TigSource that I waded into, where it was people bashing Meat Boy because how does it deserve to be nominated? It's not innovative. And all this stuff, it just doesn't apply to the reality of the situation at all. Like I don't know what they think the IGF is. They think it's like a panel of immortals in the sky that have perfect judgment, and if their judgments are ever not in alignment with the golden rules that they assume are written somewhere, then it's a travesty. And it's like, no, it's just a bunch of people that vote on shit. You know, it's like not it's not really scientific, and it's not really like it's just a bunch of people vote on stuff they like.
Bizarre thing about the whole TigSource thing is, and the reason why I made the internet's video when I was basically responding to
the famous internet's video.
It all stemmed from a post about cactus. Now I understand like people hating me because maybe I say something that they don't like. You know, I go out of my way to speak, so I'm sure I'm going to say or do something. They know what I look like. It's it's an easy situation for somebody to go, hey, I hate this guy. But Cactus, that guy did nothing. He's done nothing to anyone, never said or did anything to anyone, never challenged anyone or anything like that. He did nothing but give people free shit. And they wish death upon him. Yeah. And there is no other reason other than the fact that they are jealous that somebody else is getting attention, and they're not.
It's true. I find myself falling into the same pit. I got to admit, like, I stopped following the Meat Boy thing on Twitter because I was totally jealous of how much press you guys were getting, and it was hurting my ego to log into Twitter every day and see like, oh, they got into like 50 magazines today, and I just had to just stop looking at it because it was just I just feel like I'm not doing enough because but. The funny thing is, when you see those things happening, you automatically assume that everything is going right for those people, and the reality is that it's never true. Like Cactus has a lot of things going on in his life that aren't great too. He's not like living in a palace. Just making games.
I read something that helped me like immensely because, of course, I read a lot of blogs and a lot of other. Like crafty girls, and of course they're posting beautiful things and the fun, exciting things that are going on in their life. And so online, you're looking at like you're just seeing that one bright, shiny spot.
Yeah, you're just seeing the best of it.
You don't see every other thing that is going on, and is probably they're not feeling so great some of the time, etc. So that helped me a lot. Thinking like, oh my God, everybody has like magical cottage dwelling existence. I'm stuck here and I can't get out of this house.
Right. Yeah, there's this weird tendency to sort of look down on yourself and put everyone else up on a pedestal. But when you actually go investigate these things, you realize that everyone's struggling to figure out what the hell they're doing. And it definitely changes your perspective.
Well, like to put it into perspective as far as the Meat Boy stuff goes, to have some idea of like what me and Tommy are currently going through when it comes to pressure. Like, so we've got people like Kyle Gabler and Jonathan and everybody else who's done amazingly well, Tom from the Behemoth, and they're all telling us that Meat Boy is going to be really successful. Okay, now what if it isn't?
Yeah.
How horrible will that be? And this is the kind of pressure that we're going through, and this is the kind of mind frame that I need to prepare myself for.
See, it's kind of funny because, like, from the outside, to me, right, like, it just seems like there's no way it couldn't be successful. To me, it's, like, impossible to imagine.
But there's a chance.
Yeah, but, like, if I was in your shoes, I would be thinking completely differently. I'd be like, well, there's a 10% chance that this will do well, and there's still, like, a 90% chance that somehow it'll fail, and what if that happens, and what are we going to do? So yeah, it's just a matter of where you're sitting.
Just like the pressure and the idea of like of people saying, "Hey, you guys are the next big indie hit." It's clear as far as Limbo's come and gone. We're the next big talked about indie game. I would like to believe that it will do really well, but I get really scared because I know this game's not for everybody in the world, you know, and I get worried about what people will say, and I get worried about the reviews, and even though all this positive stuff has happened, this has not convinced me in any way that the game is going to be financially or globally or whatever at least successful.
It reminds me
I hope and pray that it'll be worth it. Like, I hope it will, because it'd be very validating, of course, to me and the work that me and Tommy have done. But there's nothing that says that it will.
No, there's no guarantees.
And everybody coming up to me and telling me how well I'm going to do is only making me worry.
Yeah.
It's only making me think, like, oh my God, not only am I going to let me down, I'm letting everybody else in the world down if I don't do extremely well. Like, if Meat Boy doesn't do extremely well, then everybody's going to, you know, be let down because they thought it did. And that's horrible, and the pressure is fucking horrible.
But there's also, like, he also can't see that nobody would be let down. Because, I wouldn't be let down, our families wouldn't be let down. The only way that we would feel bad is if it was, like, crushing to him. But as far as, like, money and stuff goes, you have no idea what that's like until you have it. So I don't feel any different.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, it's not like John Blow is going to be like, well, dude, you failed. You didn't make $12 billion, you know. I think he'd be more like, oh, it's too bad it didn't work out, you know. Like,
yeah. But there's something there, you know. It's just like, realistically, this is something that me and Tommy did that is put out there to prove our worth, and it's kind of hard to avoid that this game doesn't represent.
Yeah. You know, that's the other problem with doing things
like,
that are
on a personal level.
It's the problem with doing stuff that you invest a lot of your personal reality into, because then if people reject it, it's almost like they're rejecting you as a person, you know? Because if you pour so much of yourself into a work and someone's just like, that's just stupid, then it's like, well, you're sort of indirectly saying that what I think is stupid, you know? Yeah. And it hurts a bit more than if it was just a game that was just, you know, for whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just another one of the things. It's like that's another thing that I worry about when it comes out, you know, and the emotional side of me, of course, is really worried, you know, and that's the thing. Like all the positive press that you're reading, you know, maybe what if it's hyping it up to be something that might not be, you know, like, and that's something that worries me as well. Like, I believe in this game, but
you don't want to create like
will think the same thing or feel the same way, and
you don't want to create like a false impression for people and have them play it and be like, oh, I thought it was this other thing, you know. And I remember with Aquaria, I tried really hard to undercut a lot of the hype. Like, I was like, here's, you know, I think this is going to be great, but here's specifically why it's great, not just it's great in general. But even then, people had completely different ideas. They thought it was going to be like an open-ended Grand Theft Auto type game, and they were disappointed. And it's like, well, okay. You know, like, it's just always going to happen that people have their own sort of weird things that they expect, and they're not going to get it. And it's like, well, it's too bad, you know.
Yeah, it's just another thing that kind of sucks for me and Tommy is that once the game does come out on Xbox, we're still going to be working on it for the Wii and for PC, and if it were to do not as well as expected, it would be pretty depressing.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to get motivated after that.
Yeah, very unmotivating for us to kind of flow from that too. So
very not fun for me.
Yeah.
Overall, not fun for the majority of people, but I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's just the logical mind versus the emotional side of you, and I know logically that we'll be okay. I know logically that there will be more games in the future. I know logically that I've done all I possibly could, and Tommy and I both did amazing jobs, and I think that it'll do fine. But, you know, I can't help but feel worried. And
we'll also be happy that you're having those thoughts that you're doubting yourself, because if you weren't doubting yourself and questioning yourself and everything that you were doing, you would be a blithering idiot wandering around thinking that you were the greatest thing on earth, and that would be sad.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of self-doubt. The problem is it can spill over into feeling completely bad about yourself. So
hard to not doubt yourself to the point of like,
Yeah.
Failing something like that. But if you can have a healthy dose of questioning yourself, that's good.
Cool. Well, maybe we should end on that note and tell everyone who's listening, all 10 people, that they should doubt themselves. It's a good message to end on.
It just goes, stay humble,
Yeah.
Doubt keeps you humble, and like I said before, I don't believe I'm this amazing designer. I strive for that. That's the goal. It's not something that I believe.
And it's probably something you'll never really feel like you've obtained either.
You need to have these goals that are unattainable, because if you have goals that are attainable,
You're
and of
done.
course I'm bringing up a subject that's never ending, but when Gish won, okay, that was quite possibly one of the most depressing years of my life, because I felt like I achieved the highest point of something that I could achieve then. Back then there was no such thing as getting your game on console, and I didn't have anything else to achieve. Like, the highest was the IGF, and winning the IGF was like, I'll never make a game that compares to Gish. There's no way. I'm never going to make a game that's going to win. There's no way.
Right.
I peaked, and that's it, and that's horrible.
Yeah, I hate that feeling.
The most horrible thing possible, because you have nowhere to go but down.
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep yourself humble and realize that you're not perfect in the slightest, and that you have much to learn as life pushes you down, because the moment you think that you know it all is the moment you fucking lost. You might as well die.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with admitting that you don't know anything, because I know that I look back at myself like 5 years ago and I think, what an idiot. And I know when I'm 30, I'm going to look back at myself now and think, whoa, I was talking out of my ass.
Yeah, it's very true. And the thing I find interesting about that is it takes the idea of feeling crappy about yourself and turns it into a positive thing, because it's saying, well, yeah, I'm crappy now. But that doesn't mean that tomorrow I have to be exactly as crappy as I was today.
Yeah.
So, baby steps. Okay, well, thanks a lot for taking the time out to talk. And I would love to keep talking, but I usually just try and cut off at 2 hours, because I don't know how long people have to listen to a podcast. But
yeah, for sure.
Thanks a lot for getting on board and sharing a lot of personal stuff. I think that's sort of part of what we're both interested in too, is just the idea of exposing a lot of the reality behind things and trying to destroy some of the illusion that gets generated by this stuff. Because I think the reality is sort of more interesting and more rewarding to think about than just the sort of, veneer of, successful indie developer, they can do what they want. It's like, reality's a lot tougher.
Yeah. No, I'm all for that. It's I'm all for trying to be as honest as possible, because there were a lot of things that I wish other people growing up would have been more honest about, because it might have helped me in the long run. So I'm not sugarcoating it, Like I don't. Much like the indie biz list. I don't believe in sugarcoating things or patting people on the back in case they get their feelings hurt, because I believe that that's very, very damaging creatively and overall. It's important for people to understand how shitty things sometimes are, and the hard things that you need to go through, and how the grass isn't ever greener on the other side. It's just that's
more
life.
grass.
It's just more grass. It's not. I'm not saying it's not fun. If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't be doing it. But it's not easy.
Amen. Thanks for listening to the Infinite Ammo podcast. Check us out at infiniteammo.ca and leave your comments. See you in the next couple weeks.